Have you ever sat in your living room with the TV on just for background noise and realized the house feels a little too quiet? Maybe you look around and remember when the phone used to ring more often, when the kids were little, or when your partner was always nearby, filling the space with conversation or laughter. Now there are days when it's just you and the hum of the refrigerator. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. And I want you to know that this stage of life, while different, can still be deeply meaningful, joyful, and empowering. Growing older often brings a kind of silence that can catch us off guard. Children grow up and move away, friends relocate or pass on. Even the hustle and bustle of daily obligations slows down. Suddenly, the calendar feels emptier than it used to, and you find yourself facing more time alone than ever before. But here's the thing, being alone isn't the same as being lonely. And even if you are feeling lonely right now, there are ways to turn that solitude into strength. This isn't just about keeping busy or thinking positive. It's about reclaiming your time, your joy, and your sense of purpose, even when the house is quiet and your phone isn't ringing as often as you'd like. In this video, we're going to talk about powerful, practical things you can do when you're growing older and find yourself alone more often. Not just to pass the time, but to enrich it, to feel alive, valued, and deeply connected to who you are. Let's get into it. Let's start with something simple but often overlooked. Create a daily rhythm, not a strict schedule, but a rhythm that gives your day shape and meaning. When you're no longer waking up to care for kids, report to a job, or rush to appointments, time can start to blur together. One day slips into the next. That's when loneliness can sneak in, not because you're alone, but because nothing feels anchored anymore. So, take control of your day. Start with a morning ritual that grounds you. It could be making your favorite cup of tea, stretching your arms to the sunlight, or sitting quietly with a journal. The point is to create a moment that tells your mind, this is a new day, and I'm here for it. Then fill your hours with a mix of activities that nourish your body, your mind, and your spirit. Maybe a short walk in the park after breakfast, reading a chapter from a book before lunch, or calling a friend in the afternoon, even if it's just to hear another voice for 5 minutes. Small things matter, and when done with intention, they build a life full of moments worth waking up for. Now, once your days have a rhythm, it becomes easier to do the second thing. Rediscover your identity outside of others. This one can be hard, especially if you spent decades caring for a family, working a job, or being part of a couple. So many of us have defined ourselves by the roles we played for others. But when those roles fade, it can leave us wondering, who am I now? That's not a bad question. In fact, it's one of the most powerful questions you can ask. And the beautiful thing is, at this point in your life, you have the freedom to answer it however you want. Maybe you were always the caregiver, the planner, the quiet one behind the scenes. But maybe now you want to try painting or write that story you always told yourself you'd get to someday. Maybe you want to join a community choir, even if you haven't sung out loud in years. This is your time to become someone new, or rediscover someone you lost along the way. Start small. You don't need to reinvent your entire life overnight. Just pick one thing, one curiosity, one passion, one interest that you put off, and give it a little space. Take that pottery class, plant a tomato garden, volunteer at the library. It's not about being busy for the sake of it. It's about showing yourself that your story isn't finished. You still have pages left to write, and as you begin to build this new version of your life, you'll see. Sometimes when we think about being alone, we focus so much on what's missing that we forget what's still possible. But there's something powerful that happens when you decide not to wait for someone else to bring you joy or connection. When you choose to be the one who opens the door, even just a little, life can surprise you in the best ways. One of the most healing things you can do during this time is to reach out, even when you don't feel like it. This doesn't mean you have to be out socializing all the time or forcing yourself into crowded rooms where you don't feel comfortable. It simply means finding gentle ways to stay connected with the world. Because the truth is, we are wired for connection, just not always in the loud, busy ways we used to be. Start small. Think of one person you haven't talked to in a while, a neighbor, an old friend, maybe even a distant relative. Send them a message, give them a call. You don't need a big reason. A simple, "Hey, I was thinking about you today," is more than enough. You'd be surprised how many people are also sitting in their quiet homes, wondering if anyone remembers them. And don't underestimate the power of small interactions either. A chat with the cashier at your local market, a friendly hello to someone walking their dog. These moments may seem small, but they're not. They add warmth to your day and remind you that you're still part of the world. If you're able, consider joining a local group, not necessarily something formal, just a place where people gather around a shared interest. A book club at the library, a gentle yoga class, or even a community garden. These spaces are full of people who are also looking for connection, just like you. And sometimes, the best friendships grow in places where no one was trying to impress anyone. They were just showing up as they are. But connection isn't just about other people. It's also about doing things that connect you to yourself. And that's where the next piece comes in. Learn something new, even now. There is no expiration date on curiosity, and just because you've had decades of experience in life doesn't mean there aren't still beautiful things to explore. Trying. Something new isn't about becoming an expert. It's about lighting a spark. When you challenge your brain with something unfamiliar, even something simple like learning to play an instrument, using a new app, or experimenting with painting, your mind becomes more alive. And when your mind is alive, your heart often follows. You might be thinking, "I'm too old to start something new." But I want to gently challenge that. You're not too old. You're just not used to doing new things alone. And that's okay. It might feel awkward at first or even frustrating, but don't stop. Let yourself be a beginner again. There's something incredibly freeing about not needing to be perfect, just curious. And when you learn something new, you don't just gain a skill, you gain confidence. You prove to yourself that even now, you're capable of growth, that you're still evolving, that your life is not on pause, it's just on a different, quieter channel. And that channel is still full of music. Of course, no conversation about being alone would be complete without talking about what happens when difficult emotions come up. Because they will. There will be days when you feel forgotten, when you miss your partner deeply, when the silence feels louder than your thoughts. And on those days, the most important thing you can do is feel what you feel, without shame. You're not weak for feeling sadness. You're not broken because you grieve what was. That's part of being human. But what matters is how you meet those feelings. Instead of trying to silence them, welcome them with gentleness. Sit with them like you would with an old friend. Give them room to breathe. And then, slowly, do something that reminds you of who you are beyond the pain. Maybe that means stepping outside for some sunlight or play. One of the most powerful things you'll ever learn in this chapter of life is that you are still the author of your story. Even if you didn't choose to be alone, even if the path ahead looks different from what you imagined, there's still so much life in you. So much left to feel, to explore, to enjoy. And now that you've begun to build structure in your days, rediscovered your identity, reached out to others, tried new things, and created a space that brings you peace, there's one more step that ties it all together. Find meaning in your days, not just purpose in your past. You've lived a life full of moments, big and small. You've loved, worked, cared for others, solved problems, celebrated milestones. Maybe you spent decades raising a family. Maybe you built a career. Maybe you cared for someone who needed you. All of that matters. But now, It's time to shift your focus, not to what was, but to what is, and what can still be, meaning doesn't have to come from grand gestures. It doesn't need a big audience. It lives in the small things, like giving someone a genuine compliment, taking time to write down your memories so your grandchildren, or even strangers someday, can learn from your wisdom. Picking up a piece of litter on your morning walk because the world deserves your care. Meaning comes from how you live, not just what you do. And if you're still searching for something deeper, consider sharing what you've learned. Not to preach, but to offer. You have decades of insight about resilience, love, loss, forgiveness, strength. Somewhere, someone needs to hear what you know. You don't need a stage. Maybe it's a conversation with a young neighbor, a letter to someone going through what you've already survived, or even starting a blog or video journal, just to speak your truth. Not everyone has your perspective, and your voice, even now, matters more than you know. You've probably heard the saying, "You can't pour from an empty cup." But sometimes, we forget that we are responsible for refilling our own cups too. And when you've spent so much of your life giving to others, you might not realize that you deserve just as much care and compassion as you've given away. So, take care of yourself in ways that feel loving. Not just the basics, like eating well or going to the doctor, though those matter too. I'm talking about soul care. Things that remind you that you're more than your age, more than your aches, more than your loneliness. That you're still full of life and deserving of joy. Maybe that's sitting outside and watching the sky change colors, or letting yourself cry when an old song hits a nerve, or dressing up a little, just for you, not for anyone else. These little acts say, "I still care about me," and that self-love is where real peace begins. And peace doesn't mean you're never sad. It doesn't mean the loneliness goes away completely. It means you've learned to live beside it rather than under it. That you can feel the ache of what's gone and still choose to move forward with hope. That you can hold both grief and gratitude in the same breath. So many people over 60, 70, even 80 think their best days are behind them. But that's only true if you decide to stop showing up for yourself. Because life doesn't stop giving when you grow older. It just gives differently. Slower, perhaps. Quieter. But also deeper. More present. More real. And the gift of growing older is this: you no longer have to prove anything to anyone. You can finally live on your terms. You can say no when you mean no, yes when your heart feels it, and stop trying to be who you were before. Because who you are now, right now, is worthy, capable, and whole. So what do you do when you grow old and are left alone? You breathe. You reclaim your time. You choose connection in your own way. You learn something new. Not because you have to, but because you can. You listen to yourself without judgment. You build a space that feels like home again. You find meaning in the even after you've made peace with being alone. Even after the routines are set, the small joys have returned, and your heart feels a little lighter. There's still a question that might linger quietly in your thoughts. What now? Because while you've begun to rebuild your world, loneliness can still whisper when the lights go out. It can still catch you off guard in the middle of a perfectly normal day. That's not weakness. That's just being human. And being human at this stage of life means continuing to grow, not just in action, but in mindset. So now the focus becomes something deeper. How do you think about your life, your worth, your future, your everyday? And that begins with one powerful habit. Start speaking to yourself like someone you love. You've likely spent your life caring for others. Your children, your spouse, your co-workers, your parents. You were the strong one, the patient one, the problem solver. But now that much of the world has gone quiet, you may find your inner voice gets louder, and not always in the kindest way. So here's the truth. You must learn to be your own companion, your own encourager, your own best friend. And that means speaking kindly to yourself every single day. No more, I'm useless now, or I'm just waiting around. Replace that with, I am still here and I still matter. Say it out loud if you have to. Write it on a sticky note. Whisper it when the doubts come, because your mind believes what it hears most, and it's time it heard love from you. Another beautiful shift comes when you start to notice the beauty in ordinary moments again. One of the unexpected gifts of solitude is the ability to slow down and truly observe life. Watch how the sunlight dances through your curtains in the morning. Listen to the birds singing, the kettle whistling, the soft creak of your favorite chair. Let those little things bring you comfort, because they are reminders that life is still happening all around you, not rushing by, but gently inviting you to pay attention. You no longer need to live at someone else's pace. You can savor now. And in that savoring, you'll often find unexpected joy. And while you may not be surrounded by people like you once were, you are not without influence. You can still make a difference, even if it's just in the life of one person. Maybe it's offering a kind word to a younger person who's struggling, or writing down life lessons you wish someone had told you. Maybe it's giving away something you no longer need to someone who truly does. These acts of quiet generosity create ripples far beyond what you can see. Never underestimate the power of presence. Your presence. You are living proof that survival is possible, that grace is real, that strength doesn't always roar. It sometimes just shows up quietly every morning and keeps going. Now there's one last thing to leave you with. Something simple, something powerful. And that is this: give yourself permission to enjoy life again, not in the way it used to be, not in comparison to someone else, but in your way, right now. Dance in your kitchen if you feel like it. Wear the perfume that reminds you of happy days. Laugh out loud at a silly movie. Cry when you need to. Sing in the shower. Splurge on the cake sometimes. Watch the sunrise for no reason at all. You don't need to justify joy. You don't need a reason to smile. You're allowed to love your life, even now, even alone. And if someone asks what you're doing with all this time alone, you can look them in the eye and say, I'm living, I'm healing, I'm discovering who I am today. Because growing old doesn't mean growing smaller. It means growing deeper. And being alone doesn't mean being empty. It means learning to fill your days from the inside out. So take a deep breath. Let the quiet be your companion. Let your heart stay open and let yourself live fully, unapologetically, and beautifully. If this video has touched you today, please let your voice